What began as a routine family meeting behind palace walls spiraled into a monumental confrontation that stunned even the most seasoned royal aides. Prince William didn't just raise his voice, he shattered generations of royal silence, forcing King Charles to answer for a secret that could forever alter the destiny of Prince George. What was this deal that sparked a father-son standoff at the very heart of the monarchy? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It wasn't on the official calendar. No press briefings, no formal agenda, just a private conversation, behind closed doors at Clarence House. But when Prince William pushed open those heavy oak doors without knocking, he wasn't just walking into a room, he was crashing into the legacy of the British monarchy. King Charles looked up from his papers, startled by the cold fury in his son's eyes. No greetings, no pleasantries, just silence, until William, with a shaking hand clenched around a folder, threw it onto the table with a force that echoed through the chamber. Inside it, documents that Charles had hoped would never see the light of day. The tension was immediate and suffocating. William's voice didn't tremble, it thundered. For a man known for his restraint, for carefully measured public appearances, this was unrecognizable. He wasn't the Duke of Cambridge anymore, he was a father, a son, and an heir betrayed. The document he'd brought wasn't speculative, it was real. Black ink on royal letterhead. The contents? A confidential arrangement signed by Charles himself, outlining a radical contingency plan that would alter the traditional path of succession. More specifically, it placed Prince George's future in jeopardy not by stripping him of titles, but by subtly shifting the framework of his role under the guise of modernization. Charles's initial reaction was to deflect. He blinked, paused, and tried to question the source of the documents. But as William pressed harder, citing page numbers and referencing private meetings from years ago, the king's fade began to crack. In a rare moment of raw honesty, Charles let out a weary sigh and admitted that yes, the arrangement existed. Yes, he had signed it. And yes, it was meant to secure the monarchy's survival during its most unstable hour. But his voice wavered not with pride, but with guilt. That confession was the breaking point. William's rage turned to heartbreak. The betrayal wasn't just institutional, it was personal. He had devoted his life to the crown, shaped by the legacy of both his mother and his grandmother. And now, the very man who should have stood beside him in protecting George's birthright had compromised it in the shadows. William's words pierced through generations of royal stoicism. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed your grandson. The confrontation escalated, with aides just beyond the door frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or let history play out. What began as a father-son meeting turned into a full-blown emotional implosion, a war of values between duty and legacy. Charles tried to reason that what he did was for the greater good, for a future-proof monarchy. But William saw it differently. He saw it as fear-driven cowardice disguised as foresight. And in that room, something unspoken shifted the balance of power, the emotional dynamic, the very fabric of royal trust. But to understand why William's fury erupted with such force, we must go back to when this secret deal was first conceived in the aftermath of one of the darkest royal crises. After Diana's death, the monarchy was desperate for stability. But in that desperation, a dangerous idea was born, a covert agreement, hidden from the public and even from the future heir himself. What could be so damaging that it was kept from Prince William his entire life? The loss of Diana wasn't just a family tragedy, it was a seismic blow to the monarchy's moral foundation. In the vacuum that followed, fear gripped the corridors of power. Inside the palace, a shadowy group of senior courtiers, loyal not to any individual but to the institution itself, began crafting what they believed was a solution. They feared the monarchy wouldn't survive another scandal. They feared the emotional volatility of Charles, the public sympathy toward William, and the media's unrelenting scrutiny. And from that fear emerged something far more dangerous than public scandal, a secret plan designed not to preserve tradition, but to manipulate it. A contingency unofficial, unspoken, yet real, that would control the crown's future by any means necessary. In whispers and coded memos, it was referred to as the option, a succession framework that could be quietly activated if the public or the monarchy itself deemed a traditional path too risky. It wasn't about removing heirs, not outright. It was about shifting roles, adjusting expectations, and ensuring that control stayed where the architects believed it belonged. Under this buried strategy, foreign allies with immense financial leverage, private dynasties, and discrete sovereign funds were quietly looped into conversations about supporting the monarchy in exchange for stabilizing guarantees. And in that web of promises and power, Prince George's future was carefully threaded, not as a direct sovereign in waiting, but as a symbol who could, if needed, be redirected, not removed, redefined. What began as a whisper in secret committees grew into a documented structure kept under lock and key within the Crown Estate archives. The idea was to preserve the public's illusion of continuity while reserving the right to change course behind closed doors. It was bold. It was cold. It was strategic. But it wasn't royal. Queen Elizabeth herself was rumored to have voiced sharp objections. Those close to her claim she called the plan dangerously short-sighted and a betrayal of divine right. But by then, the wheels were in motion. Advisors from Charles's camp argued that in the wake of Diana's death, extraordinary times required extraordinary insurance. They reminded her that public opinion had never been more fragile, that foreign interests needed assurance, and that the firm could not survive on sentiment alone. Her protests were noted and ignored. As years passed, the plan faded into obscurity, buried beneath layers of protocol and administration, locked inside a vault few even remembered existed. But it was never destroyed, because those who had drafted it believed the day might come when it would be needed. They didn't expect it to be discovered by Prince William. They certainly didn't expect it to be used against King Charles. But the documents remained, waiting, untouched, until fate, curiosity, and one well-placed whisper reignited the fire. This secret could have remained buried forever until a curious leak reached the one royal determined to protect his son at any cost. It started as a whisper one palace aide overheard a conversation in a hallway and made a quiet call to someone they trusted. That call ignited a chain reaction, one that would expose the fragile foundation beneath George's royal future. It was late, the kind of hour when corridors are silent and secrets feel safe. But secrets are never safe in the palace. A junior aide, tasked with nothing more than filing schedules and organizing press briefings, happened to pass by an open door, a door behind which King Charles was speaking in hushed but unmistakable tones. Two other senior figures stood with him, their voices lower, but one phrase cut through the air like a blade: "If things get difficult, we reposition George." The aides stopped, held their breath, and in that moment, everything changed. They didn't fully understand what they had heard, but they understood enough to know it didn't belong to them, and yet it could change everything. That night, trembling with both fear and duty, they made a call to a former private secretary who had once served under Queen Elizabeth, a person known for discretion and a deep loyalty to the line of succession as it had always stood. That call didn't end in idle gossip. It set off alarm bells. Within days, William received an encrypted, anonymous email. No names, no details. Just a simple message that chilled him to the bone: read the files. George's future has been negotiated. The prince, shaken, initially believed it was a prank or some kind of digital hoax. But the tone, the timing, something about it gnawed at him. Quietly, and without informing even his closest aides, he used his personal royal clearance to access a rarely touched wing of the royal archive. This wasn't the typical vault filled with historical letters and ceremonial gowns. It was the Crown's confidential annex, where sensitive treaties, private royal agreements, and constitutional anomalies were kept far from curious eyes. What he found there didn't just disturb him, it broke him. Bound pages bearing the official seal. Timelines. Minutes of private meetings. Correspondence between palace officials and representatives from offshore trusts. Foreign interests who had, through back channels, secured certain influences within the Crown's inner circle. And threaded throughout the documents were recurring references to Prince George, not by name, but by title, by role, by the vague and haunting phrase, the heir apparent contingency. According to these plans, if the monarchy's approval rating fell below a threshold, or if internal fractures became visible, George's public presence could be reduced, rebranded, or worse, absorbed into a softer, ceremonial role under joint international oversight. It was modern monarchy by corporate design, And William wasn't just shocked by the concept, he was shaken by its existence. He traced dates, names, and most damning of all, signatures. This wasn't theory, it was action. It had been signed off, filed, and executed in the margins of power. The future had been wagered, and William realized that everything he'd believed about his role, his father, and the line he was meant to protect had been quietly rewritten before his son was even born. But the most devastating blow wasn't just in the fine print, it was in who had signed off on it. And why. King Charles had always portrayed himself as the protector of the realm, but beneath that image was a decision made long ago. A deal with private power brokers that could redefine who truly rules Britain. The revelations William uncovered were not merely strategic, they were ideological betrayals buried in the foundation of modern royalty. At the height of the post-Diana crisis, when public trust was at its lowest and the monarchy teetered on a precipice, Charles had done the unthinkable. In secret meetings away from Parliament, hidden from even the Queen herself, he sat with global financiers, foreign dignitaries, and representatives of multinational influence networks cloaked in soft power. These were not ceremonial meetings, they were negotiations. In exchange for discreet support, financial backing, media rehabilitation, international PR interventions, Charles agreed to what many would consider treason in velvet, oversight. Subtle, indirect but powerful oversight over matters no outsider should ever touch: succession, legacy, the future of the crown's bloodline. At first, it was presented as a failsafe, a new chapter for a modern monarchy in a changing world. But buried within that modernization was a silent erosion of sovereignty. Documents outlined provisions for educational influence over George's curriculum, approval rights over his public appearances, and even the option to reclassify his title in the event of political instability. These weren't just administrative suggestions, they were legal instruments embedded in agreements signed under duress, during a time of institutional panic. For Charles, it was survival. For William, it was betrayal on a scale he couldn't forgive. Charles believed he had done what was necessary. He argued that without these alliances, the monarchy would have crumbled under the weight of scandal and public revolt. He saw himself as a stabilizer, a bridge between tradition and realism. But William didn't see foresight, he saw surrender. He saw a father who sold the family's future under the guise of progress. A king who promised protection while paving the way for external control. And worst of all, he saw that his son, Prince George, had been written into this silent contract without ever knowing it. Not as a prince to be guided, but as a pawn to be managed. The divide between them grew deeper with each revelation. This wasn't just a clash of opinions, it was a fundamental rift between two visions of monarchy. William, raised in the shadow of Diana's integrity, clung to the belief that the crown was sacred, untouchable by foreign hands or private interests. Charles, molded by decades of institutional fragility and political compromise, had chosen strategy over sanctity. And in that choice, he broke the invisible bond of royal legacy, a bond William had sworn to protect. And as William confronted his father with these truths, the rift between them became more than political, it became deeply personal. In the sanctuary of Clarence House, a father tried to explain his fear. But William wasn't listening, because what Charles called survival, William saw as surrender. The man who was once his greatest example had become the face of betrayal. The confrontation, already tense from what had been uncovered, now erupted into an emotional war neither of them could control. Charles, struggling to justify years of secrecy, leaned into history as his shield. He spoke of the 1990s, those volatile years after Diana's death, when the monarchy's future hung by a thread. He reminded William of the vitriol, the crashing approval ratings, the open calls for abdication. In those days, he said, decisions weren't made with luxury, they were made in desperation. The deals, the compromises, the foreign guarantees, they weren't betrayals. They were lifelines. Charles insisted he had done it all to keep the institution intact, so that one day William could inherit something still worth leading. But William wasn't buying it. His voice, once calm, now trembled with anger. "George will not be a puppet," he snapped. "Not for you, not for anyone." The words weren't just about documents or policies, they were about lineage, about memory, about Diana. William saw this not just as a political misstep, but a moral collapse. His mother had spent her life fighting to protect her sons from the cold machinery of the firm, and now, years after her death, that very machinery had turned on her grandson. She would have never allowed this, William said with a venom that pierced the air, leaving Charles visibly shaken. For a moment, the room went silent until Charles, eyes dimmed with both defiance and pain, whispered, "I did it to protect you. To protect all of you." But to William, those words only added insult to injury. Protection that comes through control is not love, it's fear. Heated words were exchanged, laced with decades of suppressed emotion, clashing ideologies, and fractured loyalty. Charles tried to maintain composure, but the walls he had built across his reign were crumbling beneath the force of his son's fury. Aides standing just beyond the threshold could hear the raised voices, the trembling passion, and the unmistakable unraveling of the crown's most important relationship. Then came the breaking point. William, standing tall but breathless, uttered a sentence that would echo far beyond that room. "If you can compromise your grandson's future, then you've already compromised your legacy." The sentence landed not as an insult but as a final verdict. Charles, momentarily speechless, looked at his son not as the next king, but as a man who no longer trusted him. The room had become a battleground between two timelines the past Charles tried to manage, and the future William was desperate to reclaim. And as aides stepped in to diffuse what was quickly spiraling into chaos, it became clear that this wasn't just a private disagreement, it was a full-scale implosion, one that could no longer be contained behind royal walls. But the battle wasn't just inside the palace, it was about to spill into the public eye, whether the firm was ready or not. When the media got wind of the confrontation, headlines exploded across the globe. The palace had no time to react because someone had leaked the very documents William found, and the world was now reading every page. It happened overnight, like a tidal wave crashing through the illusion of control the firm had so carefully built. An anonymous account on a fringe media platform posted what appeared to be classified palace documents, scanned pages, black and white signatures, internal memos, and most damning of all, the clause detailing the potential redirection of Prince George's future role. At first, mainstream outlets hesitated. The documents were too explosive, too damaging. But within hours, digital sleuths confirmed the paper trail. The formatting matched archived royal templates. Names, codes, timelines real. All real. Tabloids ran with it. Headlines screamed betrayal, manipulation, and a monarchy in collapse. And just like that, the whispers that once danced behind palace walls were now echoed across breakfast tables in millions of homes. The royal press office scrambled. No statement had been prepared because no one believed this day would come. The king was forced to act quickly. A pre-drafted emergency speech was dusted off, adjusted, and broadcast with hollow reassurance. Charles expressed deep regret over misunderstandings regarding internal strategy, attempting to downplay the revelations as speculative frameworks from a time of uncertainty. But it was too late. The public didn't just hear the words, they felt the weight of the lie. For the first time in decades, it wasn't just the monarchy's relevance being questioned, it was its integrity. And at the center of it all stood William, silent. Refusing to comment, declining all media inquiries, William's silence became its own thunder. To the public, it looked like fury. To the press, it looked like betrayal. And to the palace, it was chaos. Every moment without a clear royal narrative allowed speculation to grow. Rumors swirled. Was William planning to walk away? Was George being hidden from view? Had the monarchy fractured from within? The vacuum left by William's silence only amplified the panic, and no amount of carefully worded statements from Charles could plug the holes. News anchors described the firm as being in freefall. Social media erupted with commentary, sympathy for George, condemnation for Charles, and an ever-growing question mark hanging over the future of the crown. Behind closed doors, aides leaked conflicting stories. One claimed William had demanded a total purge of all those involved. Another suggested Charles had tried to reach out and was rebuffed. And then came the most piercing report of all from a senior royal source who told a major outlet, "This is more than a disagreement. This is a fracture that might never heal." Suddenly, this wasn't just a scandal. It was a war within the royal house, and the nation could see every blow. And just as the public turned its eyes on George, The young prince faced the storm of questions his elders failed to answer. He's just a boy, yet the weight of centuries now bears down on his shoulders. Prince George, unknowingly placed at the heart of a dangerous power struggle, is left to navigate a future that no longer feels like his own. The crown had always cast long shadows, but never had they fallen so heavily on someone so young. While the adults fought wars behind oak doors and press conferences, George was on a school playground when the whispers reached him. A passing comment from a classmate, a teasing remark that he didn't understand, "Are you still going to be king?" That sentence, innocent in tone but poisoned with implication, landed like a stone in his chest. That night, he asked his parents a question they weren't prepared to answer. "Am I still the same George I was last week?" And in that moment, William and Catherine felt the full weight of their failure to protect him from a world that had turned his name into a headline. William tried to stay calm. Catherine tried to smile through it. But there was no script, no playbook for how to explain betrayal, politics, and legacy to a child whose only dream had been to do what he'd been told he was born to do. The media, relentless in its hunger, had turned George from a prince in waiting to a symbol of uncertainty. Photos of him walking into school were dissected for signs of distress. Pundits debated whether he would step aside or be forced to assume a new ceremonial role. Every breath he took became a political act. And still, he was only a child caught in a storm that none of the adults around him seemed able to calm. Inside the palace, the firm scrambled to regain control of the narrative. PR teams drafted statements. Messaging experts curated soundbites. But behind the curtain, William was breaking. He wasn't just fighting to preserve the monarchy, he was fighting to protect his son's identity. In long, private conversations that stretched into the early hours, William and George sat together. William didn't speak as a prince or as a politician. He spoke as a father, trying to untangle centuries of duty from the innocence of a boy who had done nothing wrong. George listened, asked questions, some small, some profound. And with each answer, his confusion deepened. Why would Grandpa make a deal that changes who I am? That question, spoken with quiet heartbreak, was one William couldn't answer because he himself still didn't understand it. Catherine, steadfast as ever, tried to maintain a semblance of routine. She encouraged school, piano lessons, bedtime stories. But beneath it all, the rhythm of normalcy had been shattered. The palace wasn't just reacting to a scandal, it was watching its future unravel through the eyes of a child. And George, though still young, began to understand that his life was no longer just his own. He had become a pawn in a game that had begun before he was born. But as George wrestled with uncertainty, one royal stepped out of the shadows, ready to tip the balance entirely. She had always maintained a quiet role, a background figure in Charles's reign, but Camilla's fingerprints were all over the documents. And when the truth emerged, even her closest allies were left stunned. The leak had shaken the monarchy, but it was the revelation of Camilla's involvement that detonated the crisis into a full-blown inferno. Hidden deep within the appendices of the succession files were meeting logs, initials, and coded correspondences that traced back not just to senior aides, but to the queen consort herself. Camilla, once dismissed as merely supportive of Charles's modernizing agenda, was now implicated as an architect of the very deal that threatened to sideline Prince George. Eyebrows weren't just raised, they were scorched. Whispers grew louder, until a former royal staffer came forward confirming what the documents had only hinted. Camilla had not only attended key strategy meetings in the early 2000s, she had pushed them forward. She believed, they claimed, that the monarchy had to be shielded from sentiment and emotion, and that if Charles's reign were to be secure, drastic measures would be required, measures that would ensure loyalty to the institution over the lineage. Sources close to the palace revealed that Camilla often voiced concerns behind closed doors. She feared the public's obsession with William and Catherine, and even more so with George, whose innocent charm had captured global attention. That level of popularity, she allegedly argued, could destabilize Charles's influence. Her solution was subtle: shape the path behind the scenes, ensure safeguards were in place, and work with those who could insulate the monarchy from the volatility of personality-driven media. It wasn't just influence, it was calculated orchestration. The phrase "by any means necessary" began surfacing again and again in notes attributed to her private advisors. And now, in the aftermath of the leak, that phrase took on a chilling new meaning. Public reaction was swift and visceral. Once seen as a stabilizing force, Camilla's reputation unraveled in real time. Her approval ratings plummeted. Commentators who once praised her resilience now questioned her ambition. Tabloids turned merciless. Protesters appeared at official engagements. Hashtags calling for her resignation trended worldwide. And through it all, Camilla remained silent but not untouched. Behind the palace gates, an internal review was launched. Confidential interviews, legal assessments, damage control. But the damage was already done. This was no longer just a matter of institutional embarrassment, it was now a question of moral corrosion from within the highest ranks of the monarchy. William watched it unfold with a cold clarity. His fury with Charles had been profound, but the revelation of Camilla's involvement pushed the betrayal into even darker territory. It wasn't just policy, it was personal. She had played a direct role in a scheme that not only threatened his son's legacy, but weaponized loyalty against blood. Allies began to rally behind him not just out of familial loyalty, but out of fear for what else might be uncovered. The ground beneath the firm was no longer cracking, it was collapsing. And with the scandal peaking, William makes a move no one expected, setting the stage for a confrontation that could end one reign and begin another. He's had enough. For the sake of his son, for the future of the monarchy, Prince William gives his father a choice: end the secret, or end the dynasty. The air in Windsor trembles as two kings, one crowned and one coming, stand face to face in a final reckoning. It didn't come with ceremony. There were no formal declarations, no advisors present, just a private message delivered to Charles requesting a meeting with no agenda, no titles, no protocols. This was not a conversation between sovereign and heir. It was a confrontation between two men who now stood on opposite ends of a broken legacy. William arrived not to plead, but to draw a line in the sand. He made it clear from the moment the doors closed, the deal must be annulled in full. Not softened, not redrafted, destroyed. The documents that once gave private power the keys to his son's future must be revoked and disavowed, or William would take the war public. For Charles, the ultimatum was a dagger to the heart of everything he had built. A monarch shaped by decades of compromise now faced the possibility of watching his reign crumble at the hands of his own son. William didn't flinch. He told his father plainly that if the palace refused to dismantle the agreement, he would publicly abdicate all future royal responsibilities and reveal everything. Names, memos, every last signature. The public had a right to know, and he would no longer be a passive figurehead in a monarchy ruled by shadows. Charles stood frozen between duty and disaster. To refuse his son meant the end of trust within the House of Windsor. To agree meant tearing apart a structure he believed had safeguarded them. But William had calculated correctly. His father was too afraid to lose everything. The silence in the room was deafening as Charles turned his gaze to the floor and gave a slow, reluctant nod. He would begin dismantling the deal. A process would be initiated. Quiet resignations would follow. Files would be retrieved and locked down. And most importantly, George's path would be restored untouched, unscripted, unmanipulated. Almost immediately, ripples of this decision began tearing through the palace. The Queen Consort was discreetly removed from two key royal committees. No public announcement was made. But insiders noticed her absence. Tensions escalated as royal advisors split into camps, those who stood by the king and those now rallying behind William, seeing in him the clarity and courage that the monarchy had been missing for years. Old alliances fractured, new ones quietly formed. And though no words were spoken aloud, it was clear that the balance of power had shifted not through inheritance, but through confrontation. In the end, Charles kept his crown, but it now rested on shaky ground. William walked out of that room not as a rebellious heir, but as a father who had reclaimed his child's future. And as George's name was once again spoken with reverence instead of speculation, the monarchy took a breath, shaken, but still standing. But as the monarchy braces for yet another seismic shift, one truth becomes clear: the battle for George's future has only just begun. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.